talk about their perspective, and then we'll open it up for about 15 minutes to hear from you, ask questions or your comments. But it's kind of a short, tight-knit kind of presentation. So Brittany, what do you think?
I think that it's no secret that police policies and procedures are not fair across the board. So they're not in favor of all citizens. And I think that in a lot of areas and communities that are of lower socioeconomic status, you will find that a lot of the policing, the procedures, and the behavior in those communities are not only against what you would normally see in communities across the nation, but they also put the people of the community in a position to where somewhat of a downward spiral. A lot of people in lower income communities find themselves in a hole that they cannot dig themselves out of. With citations, we have 93 municipalities in St. Louis. How many of those lower economic municipalities are full of people with traffic warrants, are full of people that are sitting in county jails because they don't have the financial means to pay a citation that they were given for being profiled and pulled over without any justifiable reason. It's not fair across the board. It's in some places it is a violation of human rights.
Okay. We'll hear from Reverend Kinman.
The simple answer to this question is yes, and the reason we know that is because we're here. We wouldn't be here talking about this if the answer to that was no. The problem is the answer to that question is yes, but it is not visible to all of us because of the inequity that Brittany talked about. It allows people like me to have a relationship with the police that is very different from people who are black or brown. And because I live safely in that reality, it's really easy for me to think that's the only reality, and it's really easy for me to dismiss someone else's reality. So, are police department policies and procedures in violation of citizens' human rights? Absolutely. And so, let's take care of that question really easily, and then let's ask the question why. And I've been asking that question of myself over and over and over again. And I keep coming back to a couple things, and one of them is fear. It's fear. Is that people are afraid, and we're afraid of what we don't know. And one of the results of the deep segregation of St. Louis that is generation after generation after generation old is we don't know each other. We don't look into each other's eyes. We don't see each other as human beings, and that is the very definition of denying someone human rights. It's not seeing each other as human beings. And because of that, we have people who have power, who, when they do not see the people that they are supposed to use that power to protect and serve as human beings, because we don't have this relationship, the temptation is there to use that power differently. And that's to everyone's poverty. I have a friend of mine who we do a lot of work with homelessness, and calls homelessness a dysfunction in community. Racism is a dysfunction in community. And the crazy thing about it is the police policies and procedures don't just take away the human rights of people of color. They diminish the humanity of the police, because it actually turns the people who uphold those policies into behaving less than their best selves, into behaving less than what God dreams for all of us as human beings. And so we got a problem here. And the good news that is happening out of all of this is, and it just is an incredible tragedy of how many deaths has it taken for us to get to this point where people who look like me are finally standing up and saying, oh, is something going on here? But the gift of this moment is phenomenal young leadership who have emerged at this point and who are saying, okay, we're going to dismiss with this question pretty quickly, and we're going to say yes. And so let's stop asking this question, and let's start asking, what are we going to do about it? And we have leaders in this community who are not going to go away until we come up with some pretty good answers.
Okay. Jonathan?
I mean, I can only tell my side of the story, and I feel like my two fellow panelists have already gave you all the rundown. Yes. A conversation about policing is a conversation about who do we entrust to ensure that everybody's protected in this society. And for so long, we've had issues wherein certain people aren't equally protected under the law. Certain people are able to enjoy the benefits of due process where others aren't. Some people are protected because of who they know, and often who you know are people that look like you. And so therein lies one of the vestiges of the systemic issue of racism in this country. And when we talk about, our policing procedures in violation of human rights, we're also talking about the need to educate people about what that looks like. The three panelists you see here are the only people in this room who know the answer to that question. We all do. And so it's important that calls everybody in this room to action, to continue to have dialogue about these issues, because that's where it's going to have to start. I think from the beginning of this, a lot of the youth organizations were aware that while they were aware and that while we knew about the issues, a lot of our peer groups didn't. And a lot of the people outside of our peer groups even further from acknowledging that the issues were as intense and deeply rooted and problematic as they were. And so any conversation about human rights, like is it in violation of the human right, and trying to get into that question about whether or not, because as point one says, the right to equality is a point on the Declaration of Human Rights, whether or not that point is a part of that framework, of whether or not Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, any of those gunned down by policemen, were they given access to equal rights? And were any of these 30 line items, when we look at those, because it's not just the now, it's also the future. He was denied a future. She was denied a future. Can they really have access to any of these line items after corrupt policing happens? No. And so a conversation again on human rights has to start with us already moving past this whole idea that we don't really know that we're innocent, that we haven't been exposed to some of these issues, and really get into the nitty-gritty of having good dialogue and stuff like that about it.
Thank you. So one of the things Jonathan did was touched on one of the principles, and so actually they call